Original Barman along with the two bad, wicked youths of rap. God mercy, whoa.
What's the business? Talk paper when I'm riding by. They know it's drizzle, he the truth off the east side. I know who ain't got my money because they ducking high. I grind for me and mine. I got the green light. I got to get it how I live it. That means front line. I got the zips, I got that soft, I got that hard white. I got that.
Oh, what's up, mama? Yes, the intro. What are you talking about? Welcome to the stream. My name is Jim Farrow, and I am here to tell y'all about the Sopranos show. Please like, comment, and subscribe. We're going to be discussing some heavy material today. I will not be going into length of certain topics that may or may not be censored here in the media. But I'm looking at the comments. For some reason, I cannot bring up the old ones that I can see from before we went live. So I'll just read them out for the audience. Anybody who's new here on my channel, if you just want to get straight to the meal, probably skip the first 5 minutes. I'm just kind of riffing and goofing and waiting for people to come into the stream. I will get it going. I'm going to be doing a mix of a philosophical look at the Sopranos show. I'm going to be looking at it from a historical, cultural point of view. There will be religious commentary, so theology a little bit, mainly philosophy. Why do people think the way they do? And what is the philosophy of the Sopranos, or the many philosophies? What is the belief system behind each character, and what's the show trying to portray, and why is it recognized as such a great show? Why is that? Emmanuel, I do have the raids enabled. Two Hook says, all I know about the Sopranos is Italian stuff and that ending with that song by Journey. Chance the Rice Rapper says hello. I think the rest of the comments now showed up here. I watched Jay Dyer do an analysis on the Sopranos. He talked about some of the elite literature that's within the show. Well, I'm not going to repeat what Jay did. That would be redundant. So this will be a different thing, slightly. Mainly just going to be looking at some of the motivations behind the creator of the show and what is up with, the content of the show. What is it about? Yo, new stream. And then, of course, my own opinion. Anthony says, Gabagoology stream. Grand Cherokee reviews. Can we ask silly questions in this? You can ask silly questions throughout the whole thing. This is not a serious topic. Ask whatever you want to ask. Hendix says, yo, new Gene stream. Good night, y'all. That's it. Or he's saying, have a good evening, which is about to occur. In English, isn't it interesting how in English, when you say good evening, that's kind of, hello, I'm here, and we're going to continue speaking to one another. But if you say good night, it's over. How many spoilers will there be, Jim? I'm only on the second season. There won't be anything relevant that I'm going to talk about that takes place after the second season. Because to be honest, that's where I am too, so this is all fresh on my mind. I'm mainly going to be talking about the broad ideas of the show, which for the most part, the vast majority of those show up in the first 2 seasons. So I'm going to be talking about like Vinny or some of the other characters who become prominent later. I don't care about the storylines that much. I care about the motivations, who is the character, what are they doing, and why do they do what they do. So the first 2 seasons will be where a lot of focus and relevancy is. You should play a Shin Megami Tensei game and review it. I don't even know what that is, to be honest with you. Okay, then when will you become the Sultan of Chicago? I don't know. To be honest, I don't know if I will live in Chicago forever. All right, I have not shaved. I itch, but I do not bleed. Let's get into it now. So I'm going to be reviewing each character at a time. Then we're going to look at the show overall, some of the great themes in there, and then I'm just going to open it up. You all can talk. I don't think this is like a super complicated... It's a complicated show. You have to have a brain to watch this show. That's one thing I'll say. The Sopranos show is not made for the brain dead. So if you can't think and you don't know anything about history, it's going to fly over your tiny little brain. It's going to fly over your tiny little brain. So that's that. We only have about 16 viewers. A little sad. I know everybody's not here because we're not talking about cutting people's brains off and pissing down their throats. We're just talking about a boring old show. But I thought let's switch it up a little bit. Maybe it's because it's a little late. It's 9:40 my time. So yeah, Hendix, I'm not gonna be playing that game then. Sorry. If that's the case, I'm not gonna play that game. But let's see. We'll get more people. I don't really care. I'll keep this VOD up, and you guys can watch it whenever. So, the first character of the Sopranos show is Anthony Soprano, also known as Tony. He's the father. He's the head of the house, more or less, and the story follows him. He's in the vast majority of all the scenes. Every single plot has to do with him, unless it's a very specific character niche subplot, like about Christopher or something, who is his nephew, per se. He's the main character by far, and he has the deepest material. There is deep material amongst the other characters. In fact, I need to pull up a couple other images before we begin. Like, they all have some very important stories. It's not all just stupid stuff other than Tony, but he definitely has the biggest story. He has the most deep story, and he has his conversations with Dr. Melfi, who's his therapist, are some of the best parts in the show, and that's probably what I'm going to be dwelling on. So anyway, for those of you who don't know, Tony Soprano, he's the main character of the Sopranos show. He begrudgingly is not the leader of the mob, so to speak, in North Jersey at the start of the show, though he later ascends to essentially that position. Otherwise, I'm not going to give too many spoilers. His mental state is in great disrepair. He has a great amount of anxiety and stress. He's a serial cheater on his wife, and so on and so forth. He's part of the mafia game, so selling drugs and other things like that. Though he doesn't partake of them. He doesn't really do drugs. He just smokes cigars and has beers and eats a lot of pork, but that's about it. He doesn't seem to be a druggie, unlike Christopher. But what's the most interesting about Tony is that he's a man of great complexity and a man of some contradiction, which makes him interesting. He's a contradictory character. Okay, so what makes him contradictory? What's contradictory of his character is that he doesn't really care much for slaying human beings. So he's fine with killing people. He's fine with shooting people and taking out his vengeance on people. He doesn't really seem to care about hurting people. Now, he doesn't do torture and stuff. He goes on a rant in a recent episode I watched with his therapist where he says, people who torture people and kill just for pleasure should belong in hell. He makes it clear he doesn't kill for pleasure, but he doesn't really care either. He doesn't think it's morally bad to take out fellow mob people. In fact, he even says, this is a part of, what is this? Thank you for the donation, Two Crooks. Super chat, 5 Canadian whatevers. Hendix didn't mention you can kill Lucifer too. Slander against the base roots. Also, the Mafia's relation to Catholicism will be a great video. That will be in this, so. Yeah, okay. Eastern Roman, he does do drugs at some point in the show, but he's not a druggie, whereas Christopher is. But he's a great contradictory character. And so I'm not going to get video essay into it. I don't like video essays. I just want to do a deep dive of who he is. So with his psyche, he thinks it's not a problem to hurt people, to maim people, as long as they're deserving of it in his eyes. There is a part in the show where some animals get hurt and he flies into a rage and is able to do some pretty gnarly things to the people who did that. And I always found that very interesting because he has a relationship with animals in the show, whether it's the ducks in the first couple of episodes or some horses later and other things. He's very much loves animals because he views them as innocent, whereas with human beings, he doesn't really view them as innocent. And another thing that's interesting about Tony is this relationship he has with his mother. So if any of you have not seen the show, I won't spoil too much, but essentially he's got some super serious mother issues, and that stems from the fact that the mother was kind of a controlling, brainwashing entity throughout his life. So at the start of the show, you think that the father, Tony's father, Johnny, is this super awesome mob guy that nobody can touch, but you find out it's really Tony's mother, Livia, who's the one pulling the strings, not really mob related, but just dominating everybody's lives. She's severely mentally ill, and that rubs off a lot on Tony because he sees his therapist as both a motherly figure and also a sexual figure. So it's kind of a weird combination there. And there's an episode as well where he has fantasies about a very beautiful woman that he sees, but it ends up not being a sexual fantasy, but again, a fantasy about motherly instinct, which also bleeds into his wife Carmela, which I should mention, the actress that they chose to be Carmela looks a little bit like his mother, the actress that plays his mother. So I think that was kind of intentional too. But what makes Tony the most interesting is not just this whole the mom stuff, but his relation to culture. So if you watch season 2, he is it in season 2, whatever. He goes to Italy, and when he's in Italy, he brings Paulie there as well. I think Silvio's there and Christopher, and so they all go to Italy, right? And what's really interesting about his view or his time in Italy is that he sees that there are some great differences between himself, an American Italian, versus people still living in the south of Italy. So he comments on how the Italians there eat like 10 times a day, and he doesn't understand why people do that. He prefers to just have one giant meal and maybe a few snacks and stuff. He comments about why, women have some kind of power there in Italy, and he acts like, oh, we would never have a woman rule the mafia back in America. But again, he has a serious problems with his own mother, and his own mother and his wife and other people do control him and lead him in their direction and manipulate him. So in a way, they do in fact rule the mafia. So the irony is that he doesn't see that and thinks that there's some great contrast, whereas there isn't. But there are some elements of contrast. So obviously, when Italians came over to the United States, they ended up forming their own society that was both American and Italian. So it's not just American, because if you're not Italian, you might not understand and fit into that culture. But it's not just Italian, because somebody from Sicily may not understand the strange complexities and context of American Italian life. So I always found that to be really interesting. And again, I'm not going to walk through the whole show. I don't really like video essays, so that's not what I'm doing. I'm just giving a quick analysis here. But what's interesting is that, the role of Catholicism plays, I think, a massive hand in the Sopranos show. So let me get that priest out. What's his name? Father Intentoli or whatever. Yeah. So in addition to him, we're also going to have Carmela here. So Carmela is Tony's wife, and is also a priest. And the influence of Catholicism in this show is huge. Now, it's not middle-aged Thomistic Dominican Thomas Aquinas Catholicism, clearly. It's more maybe Franciscan, maybe just very liberal Jesuit order Catholicism. And so when you look at these different rites in the Catholic Church, there's some great disagreements on theology. So it's a very spiritual show in a way. It's not like the people who are in the show are extremely devout Catholics. Carmela here is only really seen praying when something is really bad's happening and she has to pray for her family or something. But the role of the religion is still there. So people talk with their priests a lot. They mention Catholicism. They talk about a generic God figure. But their practice, at least these characters in the show, is not huge. Most of the characters are sleeping around with random people and drinking themselves half to death and doing all sorts of things that wouldn't be considered Catholic, and yet they're still going to wear the cross and claim that they're Catholic. And even Tony has a lot of shots to make against Catholicism. He says, oh, none of this shit matters. If you're eating beef in India, you go to hell. Obviously, that's not true, because you don't believe that religion's reality of the earth changes just because you don't go to a different place. Just because people believe you'll go to hell for eating beef doesn't mean that is, in fact, the reality. But he makes a lot of claims where he seems to be against Catholicism, but then he'll whip around and attack his son AJ for daring to say that there is no God or that God is dead. He's quoting that like Nietzsche philosophy, which of course is another huge part of the show. I'm going to read a couple of the comments real quick. Melly says they are cultural Catholics. It's true, but the kind of liberal spiritual side of Catholicism has a pretty big impact on this show and the people in it, what they do, what they believe. LOL, the priest always going to dinner like he wants to be part of it. Yeah, that's true. The priest recommends Buddhist literature to Carmela. Sounds like the Greeks in Richmond. I don't know anything about Greeks in Richmond, but we have a lot of, well, yeah, I don't know that much about the Greek community, to be honest, at least in Richmond. But, yeah, so one thing that's interesting Anthony brought up here is that the priest recommends a book about Buddhism to Carmela, even though he says, I don't want you to become a Buddhist. You should read their material. It might satisfy your spirit. So what's he saying? He essentially believes in like a perennial religion, wherein, here, we'll get the priest up right now. He almost believes in a perennial religion. He says Islam gets a bad rap these days. Here's what you can learn about Buddhism, but you should still be a Catholic. And of course, Carmela says, oh, I'll always be a Catholic. But they're learning about Buddhism. They're defending Islam. There's not a lot of talk about Judaism, at least from the priest point of view, but it just seems to be like Catholicism is made for your people, which in this case are Italians, Latinos, a large part of sub-Saharan Africa and other parts of Europe. But the Muslims should just keep their religion, and the Buddhists should just keep their religion. Everybody has an understanding of God in this show. And even Tony says, in India, people believe in Hinduism. So therefore, everybody just has their own religion. We should just not worry that much about, who's dogma. They'll worry about hell, they'll worry about heaven, they'll worry about repenting and stuff when it's like serious. But in terms of religion, the priest seems to have this strange perennial religious view that all the religions in the world are just part of the world, and so they can be understood in a different way. So it's kind of very Vatican II, as Anthony says. Tony says once, what kind of God would do this? Yeah, so that's a very an interesting thing I want to bring up. So in this time period, which is set in the 2000s, is still run off of late 80s and 90s culture. In this time period, again, I always like to tell people, just because the polls say more people were Christian, that's the older generation that still lived. That generation is mostly dead now, unfortunately. But the generation that anybody under 40 was not that religious in the United States of America at that time. And a lot of people only colloquially believed in God. They only believed in God when it was convenient to them. People didn't live a religious life. It was just, I identify as Christian or something. Cultural Christianity was probably bigger, but overall, it was pretty disappointing. And so if you watch The Sopranos, you'll see that. You'll see that Catholicism is just a cultural thing, except for one-off spiritual experiences or times of trauma. People will doubt their religion at the drop of a hat. They have almost no catechesis whatsoever. Okay? Catechesis, sorry. They have almost no understanding of their theology whatsoever. They don't know how to defend it from the most basic of life's questions. I mean, you see them asking questions of life throughout the show, and it's like, I thought you guys were Catholics. You should have these answers already. And yet they don't. And yet they don't care about other people's religion. There are a few comments that are negative towards Islam and Muslims in the show, but then they'll whip around and say, oh, that's just their religion. So it's almost a cultural thing. It's not even about whose God are we really worshiping. So this does seem to be kind of an ecumenist. A lot of Greeks in Richmond aren't very strict and they do whatever. Oh, yeah. Same in Chicago. I'd imagine the Armenian mob would be very similar to them in the attitude, diaspora of his homeland and views and faith. Probably. Melly says the only one who seems to be actually Catholic is Paulie. Yeah, Paulie is weird because he does a lot of non-Catholic stuff, but he also has a lot of spiritual experiences, and I guess that kind of makes him believe a little more in Catholicism. There are a lot of near-death moments in this show, and the show seems to imply there is a spiritual afterlife. It's not an atheist show, but it's very much like another show that talks a lot about religion and then ends up being unintentionally, but very intentionally perennial. And what show might that be, guys? Can any of you think of a show where there's a lot of perennial stuff that just pops up and religion is not taken that seriously? Oh, here it is. It's Lost. I'll do a whole stream on Lost if this one becomes somewhat popular. Lost is the same way, same time period, that mid-2000s. Now, hey, those are good shows. Like, they're really well-done shows. They do get the kind of spiritual grasp of stuff right. But as you can tell, nobody in the show cares enough about religion to convince anybody else that they should follow it. In fact, the main characters all happen to be Christian, but none of them know anything about Christianity. Jack Shepherd knows very little about Christianity. He's never talking about it unless he's on death's door, which happens a lot to him in the show for some reason. Anybody else who's on death's door also mentions God, but they don't mention specifically Christ. They don't mention any kind of Trinitarianism. They don't mention anything even close to cultural Catholicism. In fact, Lost is probably a more extreme version of what you see in The Sopranos. In The Sopranos, they have that kind of Enlightenment deism, which we talked about on the previous stream. But they do have a flavor of that Italian Catholic cultural heritage. In Lost, absolutely not. It's really just, we are Christian. And you can tell, like, in this final scene in Lost, I'm not going to spoil it for those who haven't seen it. Kind of a dumb ending, though. They're all in a church. It's not a mosque. It's not an Abrahamic faith center. It's a church, but it's a perennial church. Because as Jack Shepherd's walking through the final room or whatever, there's stained glass in it. It shows a cross, and then some Hindu thing, and then the Star of David, and then the Star and Crescent of Islam. So it's a Christian church, but it's really for all religions too. But it just happens to be designed for a Christian church. Why is that? because I've been trying to say, guys, for a while, and I think I'm very vindicated in this, that the perennial religion views Christianity as the main character, not the one true religion, but the true religion, and the other religions can latch onto it and be symbiotic, and they can have disagreements, but we don't know what's in God's mind, so it's okay to have disagreements and contradictions, whatever, it doesn't matter. But Christianity is the anchor point. And so what I've been saying for years, I think is true. People keep whining about how, it's all going to be completely atheist in the future. The atheist transgender furries are going to take over the world. No, they're not. There's never more than 0.5% of the population of the United States. There's a much stronger chance of the big religion just being perennial Christianity. Which religion out there is doing the most ecumenism? Is it Rabbinic Judaism? Are they going to Tibet and preaching to the Buddhists? No. Is it Islam? Not really. Islam might sometimes jump on board, but who's the one initiating the ecumenism? It's always Christianity. You have the Pope's remarks in Indonesia recently. If you ask the Diamond Brothers, they've been doing this ever since the 1960s. This has been full of the kafirun. Okay? And then not just the Catholics, but in here, unless I'm mistaken, this is not a Catholic church. This is just might be a generic Protestant church. And in this Protestant church, all the religions are here. You have Sawyer, who we can only assume is a Baptist or evangelical because he is a Southron man. We have Jack, whose father's name is literally Christian Shepherd. They even make a joke about that at the end. He must be some kind of non-denominational. John Locke. The bald guy's name is literally John Locke. What else do I have to say? And then you have the generic Muslimeen Arab guy played by someone from southern India, and he somehow just dies in a suicide bombing. I mean, I don't know how that passed even back then. And he's there too, and we're all in the church. And it's just very bizarre how it's always Christianity. This is the perennial religion. I don't see the Muslims going out and telling other religions, you're part of us. We will compromise a little bit and you compromise a bit. We'll all be the same religion. Some Muslims might be lazy. Like last time we had Ahmed call in here and he said, there's Javanese Muslims who do paganism and stuff. Yeah, that's just laziness and bad catechesis of Islamic doctrine. But the people who lead the Islamic religion aren't running around telling Catholics, hey, guess what? Your Trinity is actually our religion. They're saying, no, it's not. It's always the other way around. It's the Pope or it's Protestant churches and sometimes even Orthodox people who are saying, hey, we're all part of this religion together. It's always the Christians who begin this endeavor. Anybody else notice that? So, what do you think of the appearance of the Holy Theotokos to Pauli? Still my favorite moment in the show, at least top 10. I haven't seen it in a while, so I really need to see the context before that. I'm still at the end of season 2. Or maybe the beginning, the middle. So I haven't gotten to that yet. Okay, the Ahmadiyya are ecumenical, but they're considered on death row if you ask any other Muslim. If you ask any other Muslim group, that group would be on death row. They don't really count, I'm sorry to say. So we talked about the priest. We talked about the religious part really quick. I do want to talk about the kids because this has to do with the religion, but I will talk about the Italian thing first just so we don't just stay on the religious part. So when they go to Italy, like I said, the actual Italians there don't see these Jersey mafia Italian guys as the same. Now, I think that this episode gets overblown by people. I think people take the lesson that, Paulie and Tony and everyone else are not Italian. That's not what the show is saying. It's just saying there's a difference. But none of the guys here actually think that these guys aren't ethnically Italian. They just think that they're rude-mannered Americans who do not have Italian customs, like manners and gestures, and they forgot how to eat good food, and they have a cheap, commercialized version of the food. That's the implication you get. But it's not that they aren't Italian at all and that they should just go back to being generically American, because that's far from the case. Many times after that, many episodes later, Tony will say, I'm Caucasian, but I'm not white. I'm Italian. I'm not American. The Italian immigrants came here. They worked their ass off and they didn't want to assimilate. They wanted to keep their culture. And he doesn't speak fluent Italian. And so that's kind of like me and my family. My family came over. They really wanted to keep the culture, but they didn't hold on to it super strong. And me and my sibling do not speak Lebanese Arabic fluently. All right. I had to teach myself a lot of that. And I didn't get it straight from my family. So as a diaspora myself, even though I'm not from Italy or anything, I can see the similarities. And that's why this is a really strong show, because not just cheap Italian knockoffs of the Goodfellas and stuff, it's actually talking about the cultural endeavors and the cultural meaning behind everything. So there is a difference. If I went to Lebanon, last time I was there was 2015, there is a difference between myself and other Lebanese. The way I think of my identity and the way I think of my religion is different to them, because I'm viewing it as some really niche, weird minority living in the new world in Anglo-American civilization. And so I view myself as, not really. I mean, to be honest with you guys, I know this is going to get sound clipped and everybody's going to do conspiracy theories. But as a kid, I would see a lot of similarities between Christian Middle Easterners and Jews here in the United States. Not in terms of culture, really, but just kind of where we are in the grand spheres of cultures and makeup of cultures in this country. And so that's way different than the way a Lebanese Christian who's never left Lebanon views himself. And so that is a way to understand the Southern Italian culture in Italy today compared to Southern Italians who came to Jersey or New York or whatever. There's a massive difference there. The "we are all part of this faith together" is often an attempt to get others to convert, but it doesn't work. It compromises Christianity. I don't know. I don't think that it necessarily they want people to convert and become Christians. Like the people on the ground, like let's say Two Crooks, you and I were involved in this, you and I would probably think we're converting people, right? But I think the kind of people who make these grand media things, remember, this stuff is not, all right, this stuff is not accidental, it's intentional. I'm trying to find that thing so I can show you the church part, because it really, yeah, here, look at this. This is exactly what I'm talking about. This is a better image. Check it out. Mr. Jack Shepherd. It's a blurry image, so apologize for that. What do you see on the stained glass? You see Taoism, Buddhism, that's the wheel, I'm going right to left, Christianity, Hinduism, Judaism, Islam, but who's above all these religions? What's above all the religions, guys? Is the sun. Does that mean I think that the big scheme is sun worship? No. But it does mean that there are all these religions and they're like rays of the sun. Do you understand the symbolism here? It's not just, oh, this is the generic afterlife. Because remember, if this is from Jack Shepherd's perspective, why is he seeing the Islamic and Buddhist stuff? He's not Muslim and he's not a Buddhist. The sun is above them. And so that's what's binding them together. But the Christian church is the way that ecumenism is built on. And so they don't necessarily need 2 billion Muslims to become Christians. They just need hundreds of millions of Muslims to agree that we all worship the same God. It's like I'm the Islamic rite of the Abrahamic religion. You're the Christian Catholic rite of the Abrahamic religion. And that Buddhist guy, he's part of the Vedic rite. So you got the Abrahamic sect, and then in the Abrahamic sect, you have the Islamic rite, the Christian rite, the Jewish rite. Then you have the Vedic sect, and you have the Hinduism, Sikhism, and Buddhism. I mean, to me, that kind of looks like what we're looking at here. So, yeah, this has nothing to do with Sopranos, but, I mean, it does, but it doesn't at the same time. So, we talk about the Italian thing. Let's get on to AJ, everybody's favorite. I love scenes with AJ because he's just such a little shit, and it's really funny to see AJ because I think he's relevant today. I think that unlike the way that Tony behaves and other people behave, he's not just a relic of the 90s and the 2000s. Now, his usage of the internet, his lack of TikTok and Instagram and stuff, okay, maybe you and I can't relate to that much, but he's definitely someone that people can relate to on a personal level. Look at him. He is way more educated than his parents. All right, Carmela is smart. Everybody keeps saying she's intelligent in the show, but she doesn't have book intelligence. She's just a clever woman. Tony, he's kind of a bonehead. He's not a super smart guy. He's a deep guy. Like, he gets when there's deep philosophical stuff happening, but he's just not very intelligent. He's not a moron. He's just not very intelligent. AJ and Meadow are very book intelligent. Like, here he is quoting this Nietzsche nonsense. And actually, he gets destroyed by Kierkegaard later. But the point is that, look, death just shows the ultimate absurdity of life. Life is absurd. He says that God is dead, goodness forbid. And he's just quoting all this Nietzsche stuff because why? His parents are cultural Catholics. They don't know anything about the religion. The mother's inviting a single male priest over in the middle of the night for some unknown reason for male companionship, and he wants female companionship. They're drinking wine together. They're watching movies, reading books about Buddhism. That's not the Catholic faith. That doesn't answer anybody's life questions. Tony's running around shooting people and trading drugs and stuff. How's he going to teach anybody about the Catholic religion? And AJ doesn't go to church, nor does he pray very often. So it's kind of, I can't believe people are surprised that this character becomes the way he does. Everybody's gone through stuff like that. You all think, oh, my parents don't, there's no way my parents have it right. So whatever the truth TM is, it's not what my parents have right. And then remember what we talked about when Two Crooks and some others were on here on the screen with me. What did we talk about? We talked about the fact that back then, outside of your parents, what did you have? You just had the TV pastor dude, and he was totally cringe. There was no internet. There was no Jay Dyer to go and listen to. There was no Capturing Christianity. There was no Wes Huff versus Billy Bob Thornton or whatever that dude's name is. You didn't have that. You had some Bapto evangelical guy in a button down saying you need to be cleansed by atonement blood, and you don't even know what that means. What the hell is this? I'm gonna turn this off and I'm gonna go watch the new Nirvana video. And yeah, dude, Nirvana's cool, dude. And that was it. That's what people believed. So also back then, Christianity had nothing to battle other than gay marriage. So the only thing it could battle was Harry Potter and World of Warcraft. And like, oh, you watch Teen Titans? Well, guess what? You're a pagan. It's like kids didn't want to hear that. They wanted to watch Teen Titans and have fun. So all Christianity was just buzzkill religion. And a lot of you guys don't remember because you're all young, like me. But there was a time, especially in the 80s and early 90s, when the bulk of Christianity in America, the representation of it was not some strong, patriotic Western man who wants to fight the hordes of Eurasia or something like that. Right? Men were like half bald dudes with a gut who just wanted to be left alone after their 9 to 5, to sit in their lazy boy chair, whatever, eat hot dogs and shit from Costco, and put on the plasma TV. That's what men wanted to do in the 80s and 90s. Women were actually the ones upkeeping Christianity from the 50s until the 90s. Women competed with one another to see who would be the best dressed family at church, who would be the best behaved family at church. Doesn't mean they were highly theological, but it was a womanly, at least in America, it had become a womanly religion. That's why so many men got turned off from Christianity, because women had made, moms really, had made, and not very cultural moms, had made Christianity into one of two things. Jesus is your boyfriend, or church is about being uppity and preppy. Like, men don't care about being uppity and preppy, and they don't want a boyfriend. So, at least the ones who would be interested in church. But so, you know what I mean? So that was the problem. There wasn't much of Christianity to salvage. You want to listen to some mom tell you you're some fucking sorcerer because you watched Harry Potter. So that's why it was cringe. I'm going to read some of the comments. And in this house, he was a saint. Yeah. Get ready, Jim. Big dump, huge dump. Dude, I don't want to know what you're doing in the bathroom, okay? Emmanuel, welcome. ALC, shit. Jim Bob raid. Okay, am I having a raid at the moment? Am I being raided? Is this a raid, a 40-man raid? Anyway, we're talking about, hello everybody who's new or not new. What's up? I'm Jim. This is not your average video. I usually go in deep into theology and stuff, but today we're just talking about The Sopranos. Thanks for coming in. Say whatever you want to say, and I'm going to let the call-ins in a second. But basically, we're talking about Nietzsche and the kind of absurdity of AJ's claim that everything in life is absurd. We were knocking kind of the fact that by the time of the 50s to the 90s, Christianity had become a very womanly, momish religion, a preppy religion about don't be a fucking witch and play Harry Potter. And like that was the only battle Christianity had other than gay marriage. So it's no wonder that AJ, with access to the early budding internet forums, drifted toward this kind of weird nihilism because the only figures he had in his life that were Christian were his parents, and they were complete hypocrites. And then I was also showing this tab which I know some of you already saw, but this is from the last episode of Lost. I'm not going to spoil the whole show, but a guy who's literally the son of another character named Christian Shepherd is looking at an afterlife image, and we have all these religions here: Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, Christianity, Buddhism, Taoism, underneath some perennial sun. And we're talking about how in this time period, both in the time period of The Sopranos and the time period of Lost, which kind of overlap, you have a culture of let bygones be bygones. We're in the new century now. We don't need to kill each other over religion. So if brown people with towels on their heads want to be Muslimin, they can be Muslimin, and Europeans and Americans can be Christian, and other brown people with dots on their head can be Hindus, and that'll be it. Like, just everybody will just get along. I'm Abrahamic, and my right is Christianity, and that dude's Vedic, and his right is Hinduism, but all the religions lead to the one sun, or whatever that thing is at the top. So that's another thing that we were mentioning. I'm going to move on now because we already spoke about AJ and all this ecumenistic stuff. I want to talk about Carmela Soprano a little bit. We have a few comments that I do want to read before I get into any of it. You guys kind of popped up out of nowhere. Raid by Jim Bob. Hello, Jim Bob. Or hello, and thank you for the raid. Austin DeTulio. Raid. Jim Bob raid. Someone says you are all going to hell. Okay. I'll see you there, I guess. I don't want to be mean, evil, ugly, corporate Republican man. Haha. Yeah, we did talk about the corporate Republican man. Thoughts on the new Trump's new meme coin? All right, I always miss these meme coins. I don't want to talk about that stuff. Georgian dude is in chat again. Shout out to Biza. I don't know what that is. Christ is revealed. I started reading Kierkegaard because of that chubby kid. Yeah, I did mention that. I'm staying here. This guy is stupid. Thank you very much. Why don't you come in and tell me why I'm stupid? Woke Sopranos. I don't think it's a woke show. I'm just giving some interesting thoughts about why the show was made and some of the influence that goes into it. And yes, I know you guys came from the Jim Bob show. I will allow you to come in to the stream in a moment. Not Carmela. Meadows, another example that we see here of this kind of 90s culture thing. It's the 90s. Parents are supposed to discuss sex with their children. So what was I mentioning just earlier? That religion had become a backseat thing. Oh, you're a white American, you're a Christian, that's fine. Put that in the backseat. That brown guy over there, he's a Muslim. Put that in the backseat. What matters more is we're all Americans. We all believe in the same God. So let's just all be Americans. And as I said, it's always Christianity that has to be the ecumenistic one. It's always Catholicism or Protestantism reaching out to the Muslims and saying, hey, we worship the same God. You never see Muslims coming over and going, hey, did you know that when your Saint Augustine was talking about the filioque, it was actually the Quran and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Did you know that? Like, Muslims don't ever talk like that. It's always Christianity saying, Christianity is the cool one that should be the heart of the perennial religion. Christianity is true, they'll say, but then they'll say, let's let bygones be bygones. The Muslims worship the same God anyway. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day. You're not going to go to hell for being born a Muslim. And so we can all worship together in a Christian-looking building, of course. So that's that. I don't know what this Nico Pluto guy's problem. I want to invite guests just because I'm curious what he has to say. Yeah, I'm not going to get rid of the commercials, so you can give me your 5 cents. Messages are pinned. You guys can come in. Irrelevant music. Are you you live in America or are you in Europe? Yeah, I'm talking really fast. If some of you guys don't know what Vatican II is and Nostra Aetate or Lumen Gentium, etc., then you're not going to get what I'm talking about. I don't speak slowly. I don't over-explain stuff. If you don't know the basics of what Vatican II is, and you don't know the basics of what the word ecumenism is, then you are a rat's shit. So Merle or whatever, why don't you come in here and tell me why my opinion's retarded? Hello, Kai. What's up?
Hey, bro. Yeah, I watched The Sopranos, I don't know, 4 years ago. No, you're kind of reinvigorating everything. I'm just sitting back.
Oh, I'm reinvigorating? What does that
mean?
I
meant you're bringing it back up again. I'm thinking back, oh. And yeah, I definitely see That's definitely interesting because now it's more polarized. Back in the 90s, there's still some of that you do you because I have some like, parents, who are 90s.
You have some parents. How many? You have 10 parents?
Well,
Okay.
just my mom. Well, just like my family in general. They're like,
Yeah.
you do you. But then my more progressive family members, no, it's polarized.
Yeah, well, there are a couple comments. I just want to answer some of the comments real quick, like Merle's World and stuff. Yeah, I'm not telling you guys that I think we all worship the same God. I'm telling you that ecumenism says that, and it was really big in the 90s, the 2000s, and it's making a resurgence today. Just because I'm explaining something doesn't mean I believe in it. So, anyway, so Kai, what do you think of? I want to ask you about this specific topic. So, I mentioned not just The Sopranos, but Lost as well, where I think there's a lot of this ecumenistic stuff that creeps in. And it's like we all worship the same God, and
Mm.
there's one God, and it's not totally divorced from Christianity. There's like Christian symbolism, but somehow it like includes Islam and Buddhism too. Like, what do you think about that?
I haven't watched that one yet. Dang it.
Well, what about in Sopranos for the fact that all the Catholics in the show just happen to be cultural Catholics, and Carmela, she gets a book about Buddhism from her priest, and the priest says that Islam has a bad rap and stuff. Like he doesn't seem to think that Catholicism is the one true religion. So I don't know why he's a priest, but what do you think of that kind of topic?
Hmm. Yeah, nominal Christianity. I gotta think a bit more about that. I gotta
That's
ruminate.
fine. I'm not. Hey, this isn't a quiz. We're just here to talk. So you don't have to know the answer. I just thought it was interesting. I'm gonna let my
Uh,
friend William on, but we can all talk together. I like to have multiple people on. Hello, William. What's up?
Hey, James, how you doing?
I'm doing good.
Yeah, I think, at least in my opinion, I think there's a little bit too much focus on the ecumenism aspect. I think that is important, but I think a aspect of the show that well, I remember you said you wanted to talk about it more was the actual how like okay, like they're culturally Catholic, but then they actually are Catholic, and I think that is one of the most interesting things about each character, their motivations, how they view the world and everything. Because I remember
For sure.
when, yeah, when AJ is going on like the nihilism LARP, and then he's playing baseball with what's up, Pussy Bompensiero and his son. Like he's playing baseball, and he doesn't really want to play and whatnot because he's just like, oh, nothing matters. But then, and I could tell like there's something about Bompensiero, like he doesn't like he lacks the tools to properly explain why, but he can still kind of explain to Anthony like, like this matters, like sometimes you don't understand why it matters, but it does, like these important things and you pass these on to your children, like that's
But then
just
his
life.
but then his son is way more eloquent than Pussy is, and same with AJ. He's way
Oh
more
yeah, that's right.
educated than Tony is. Like all the kids are way more well read, and like the guys who are Tony's age, they can like barely even speak properly.
Yeah, I mean that's just I think highlighting a generational difference between, Tony and Pussy's age and then like AJ and Pussy's son. Just because I think people got more similar just through like I think their everyday life was just like for people of that generation that were younger, I feel like the average person and like what they did on a daily basis was more similar as opposed to like Tony's age because they hadn't been as assimilated into the regular American society yet.
Yeah,
Because like it's one thing for like Tony to go to Italy, but like it would be exactly like that. But I feel like if his kids went to Italy, they would be way more out of place.
definitely. And I also think that when I was talking about the ecumenism thing, just because I got people in the stream now, guys, doesn't mean that's it. That's the end of my topics. I would just prefer to talk about this with other people instead of, I rant all the time. It's time I take a little break. But, there are a lot of elements, like you said, William, that are actually Catholic.
Mhm.
And it's quite interesting because even Dr. Melfi, she seems to be a little less, as I guess, stereotypical Italian Jersey as like Tony is, but
Mhm.
she'll still appeal to universal ideas, even though technically she's supposed to believe in continental philosophy. So I think it's very interesting that there is a Catholic undercurrent to it, but it's still kind of lukewarm. I mean, you yourself are Catholic, right, William? So
Yes,
what
I
is
am.
your
Yeah.
your perspective of? Are you as well, Kai?
Yeah.
Oh,
Or what
nice.
do you guys think? One at a time. What do you guys think?
Do
Yeah,
you want to
it's-
go first?
From what I think, yeah, it's a reflection of the, I think, everyone likes to say the therapeutic, moralistic deism. I think that's what it is. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
agree.
it's a really interesting era, because like now that people, the church, whatever. So then when they disregard that, I find that's interesting that they find the objective stuff in the therapy now. And now they're getting the objective forms flowing in through the therapy. So that's an interesting thing.
Yeah, I feel like it does kind of highlight the kind of, okay, we're not really well catechized, and because that we have to, because a lot of people, if they're not well catechized, will just, they'll find other means to be sort of intellectually, fulfilled and whatnot. So of course, in this case, it was big, the therapy at the time. But I think the biggest way that as the question you asked me, Gene, is like, what is it about the characters that are actually Catholic? I would say it's it's not really the doctrine, but I mean, it kind of is, but it's just there's this sort of way of life that you kind of observe with Catholics, like whether it's Italians or Mexicans or Hispanics, and Irish, where it's like they just kind of have fun, like they just rejoice. Like there's this really, kind of joie de vivre kind of aspect to their
Oh,
daily
wait,
misery.
that was French, and France was Catholic. There you go. You just proved
Exactly.
your own point.
Yeah, no, that is a good point. Where it's like a lot of times, like, okay, it's like, what do these people like to do? They just like to hang out with friends and family, drink a coffee, visit people in the hospital, and it's like we're gonna
You're
be.
right. I don't mean to interrupt you, but you're right. I
Mhm.
noticed that in the show. They just seem to want to do almost nothing, but as long as you're going somewhere to do nothing, it's
Yeah.
fun. Like
Yeah, like it's basically the kind of like counter nihilism where it's like, okay, the only thing that matters is Jesus, and because we know that Jesus Christ died for us on the cross and we're saved through him, then everything's going to be okay and we should just be happy, and also what you could tell about the characters and their relationships is like, okay, even though they have like this kind of, this ring of like, bad sinful activities that they do, but like the interactions character to character, like just within the relationships of the family and the friends, well, not always, but generally, you could tell that they really do love each other. Like I could tell that the actual like Tony's, like big, like very intimate ring, like Silvio, Paulie, and all of them, you could tell that they really love each other. Like they will go through and through for each other. They enjoy each other's company. They like playing poker. They like just drinking coffee. Yeah. And
what do you think of that, Kai? Just want to give you a chance to
What I'm
comment real quick.
thinking and ruminating about is because of the materialism, the materialist assumptions, 80s, 90s, whatever. I think the theme I see is like, they're all giddy happy, Jesus loves us, and like, the kind of pushover mom type, like 2000s video games. Christians are freaking out over video games. I remember being a new atheist, be like, these Christians hate GTA.
That's what I was saying. Like,
Yeah,
oh
like,
man,
are you
mom won't let me
serious?
play Harry Potter. Like, she won't let me read Harry Potter. So Christianity's debunked because I can't read the Philosopher's Stone or whatever.
And so
Yeah.
what I think happened is because of the bad catechism and, life is good. I think what happens, we forgot how to weep. And it's kind of the same cycle with the Israelites. I think we just forgot how to weep properly. That could be something.
I think it's a good point. And like I said earlier as well, before you guys hopped in, I think at this point, life had become so good that Christianity became PH Joy. What is this? I can't even respond.
It became a nice guy.
Well, I didn't have any battles to fight, so it's like, what's the most evil
Yeah.
thing in the world? World of Warcraft. I guess I better declare war on World of Warcraft or something. So it's like there's nothing to really combat, and I also think it just didn't. People, especially in America, didn't know how to translate Christianity especially detached from Europe, in this hyper tech society. Like, there's what do we do? Like, we just get on TV and command people to read the Bible? I mean, I don't know. So it was an interesting time period for sure. Things are much different now in influencer culture and so on.
Yeah, no, and also, Jim, a point you made about like in that time with AJ, there was no real Jay Dyers or anybody to listen to. I think that that's very true when helping us understand why, as bad as like a philosopher or as bad as a person can get in their beliefs, like it can help you understand, okay, that's probably why they thought it was the case. Because like Nietzsche, the only exposure he had to Christianity was just like his milk toast like dad who was like a Lutheran pastor who just preaches about being nice, and I'm sure, yeah, a lot of Christians at his time were just kind of lamos, and there was no
Yep.
internet, there was no way to see, okay, wow, this is actually the really, really cool, enriching history of Christianity. Okay, you got the Eastern churches, you got the Pope who stopped Attila the Hun from sacking Rome. Like that's
Yeah.
when I learned about that. I was like, I didn't know that. That's so cool.
It
Why
is
don't they
cool.
teach us about that?
Well, another thing also, I don't want to do too much on Nietzsche's career, but if you read his stuff, like he's mainly going off against like really kind of heretical forms of pacifism and like Platonic mysticism and stuff. So he kind of blends them together. But per The Sopranos, before we get too carried away, I do think that the integral thing to mention is that I think this show and Lost, if you guys haven't seen Lost, is really good as well.
Never seen it.
Are really like, if you want to know what is the idea of the mid to early 2000s, which came in from the 80s and 90s, if I could sum it up in a sentence, it would be history is over. Now we're living in post history.
Mhm.
Nobody thinks that anymore, thanks to all these wars and COVID and crazy stuff that's happened.
Donald
Nobody
Trump,
really thinks that anymore. But back then, it was like, life is so good. We don't need to fight each other over religion. Like, history is over. Like World War II, that was it. The Cold War, that was kind of the
Yeah.
end. History's done. And in Lost, you see that. And there's even documentaries on BBC. I've posted one of them, like a part of it, before on my channel, where the narrator walks in and literally says, people say history's over. And it's from like the late 90s. And people genuinely thought like there's going to be no more conquests and wars and stuff. Like, we're all just going to be cool and do our 9 to 5s. Not the case, clearly. But that's what people thought.
Yeah, no, and I think I don't know how old you are, but I kind of like I assume we're all similar ages. Where like we kind of grew up in the tail end of that. I would say like early 2000s is the very tail end of that kind of like the boomer paradise. And I remember this is an idea you talked about, Jim, in your analysis of Over the Hedge.
Oh yeah, I
Right, 'cause
forgot I
that's-
did that.
Yeah, and that movie does a really good job of just showing like, yeah, suburbia is pretty lame.
That's actually another great example. We got Over the Hedge, Lost, and The Sopranos. If you guys haven't watched that, you haven't filled the Dream curriculum yet. So get to it. Watch that DreamWorks.
Yeah, I don't. Have you seen Narcos, Jim?
I haven't. What is that about?
Well, it's about the the cocaine trade from Colombia and whatnot, and it's
I watched.
it takes inspiration from a lot of the other kind of crime father Sopranos. So it's basically, instead of Tony Soprano being the main character, it's Pablo Escobar, but it's actually more it's told from the perspective really of Steve Murphy, which was the main DEA agent tasked to capturing Pablo Escobar. But it's interesting because you actually you see Pablo Escobar through his whole career from when he started out to when he when they killed him. But I think this is more. This is actually something I read in real life. I really wish they would have put it in the show, but I was getting about the how the characters almost are like they are still Catholic, like in a genuine sense. So Pablo, do you know anything about the story of how he like made his own prison and it was total BS?
A little bit. Yeah, a little. And guys, to those who just joined, I will let you on in literally 1 minute once William has given us the introduction to this show. Then I'll let you guys on. Go.
Yeah, it's this really cool story, and then I'll give other people the time they need. So Pablo, they were like, the Colombian government's like, all right, you're arrested. And he's like, okay, I'll go to jail. I get to make my own jail. And of course, they caved and they're like, okay, cool. And so he was still running operations from inside his fake jail, which was called La Catedral, the cathedral. And so the bishop of Medellin disguised himself as a milkman, delivering milk to his prison. And then once he actually got inside, he revealed who he really was. And Pablo was just astonished, and he asked him who sent him. And he said, who sent me? The one who will judge you in the end. So, and
That's
Pablo,
cool.
he's appealing to his sentiments because Pablo, like when he grew up, he grew up in a peasant family in like Latin America. He as a little boy likely, revered Catholic priests, and that's
Yeah.
a lot of children actually do that too. But yeah, and so then the bishop demanded that he confess himself and then he give up the life of crime. And Pablo, he made a confession.
There you go.
Yeah, so
That
I
is
mean,
cool. I will have to check that series out and give me more material to talk about on here, obviously. But
yeah,
really good recommendation for sure. I'm going to let, and Kai and William, you guys can stay here and keep talking, but I'm going to let Ahmed on, then Young Gamer, and then Two Crooks. What's up?
Hi, hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Great, great. I'm gonna have to go to work soon, so I'll just be brief. A perfect image. I was just gonna talk about that.
There
You
you go.
know,
I thought you'd want
um,
to.
yeah. So ecumenism. You know, I think ecumenism is really something tempting, something useful for the majority religion to always want to do. It's not just Christianity. When I say Islam does it in Indonesia, I really mean it. It's not just lazy laity still wanting to practice paganism. No, it's an actual philosophical movement. Actually, look it up. I'm gonna write it down in the chat. It's called Islam Nusantara.
Yeah,
Nusantara is a ancient
I
name for
remember you
Indonesia. It's an
mentioned.
actual
I
yeah,
remember you
yeah.
mentioned
It's
that
an
before.
actual philosophical movement in Indonesia. Um, it's basically Islam trying to be ecumenist with other religions in Indonesia, and it's an actual philosophical movement, similar to what you see over here. And I think the reason why ecumenism happens for all religion is that even though you're the dominant religion, there is a benefit in getting people to unite in society, right? So when you can get rid of that religious roadblock, then yeah, you're gonna try it out. The pagans did it, for example. I think with Sol Invictus. Um, well, yeah, Christians do it, like what you're showing here. So I don't think it's a new phenomenon. I think it's just something that's very tempting to do. Indonesia
Well,
has it
I
too.
would I would definitely say that it's been tried in the past, but never to the extent that it has been since like the end of the world wars for sure. Like the Vatican II stuff, and then the Pope John Paul II councils were like enormous, enormous compared to in the past. You had some people like Saint Francis of Assisi going, "Hey, we should try to be kinder and reach out to Islam," but he was like one of thousands of people, and most people would have disagreed with him. But he would have had a following in that endeavor, but most people would still disagree. Whereas I think it's become a lot bigger, kind of on all fronts today. I think a lot of that has to just do with the fact that ease of communication, internet and technology, more globalized economy. So there's less countries who are just out there doing their own thing, disconnected from everybody else. I do think that that's definitely part of it. As for the pagan thing, I'm still, and I learned this from a German. I don't know whether he's French or German, but I'll give you his YouTube channel as well. I think honestly that European paganism all kind of comes from the same place. I think they're all pretty similar. So I don't think they really had a need to unite because they were similar to begin with in a way. But yeah, thank you very much for that perspective from the Indonesian slash ex-Muslim context.
I have one last question, and you might answer that, but I have to leave soon.
Okay.
So with with ecumenism or the desire to compromise your religion, even if you're the majority, in order to unite society wholly, how do you think Christianity is going to solve that? Because you know, for someone secular perspective who see religion as, I guess you could say, just human culture and evolve for the needs of its time, um, how are you going to make sure that that your religion is not just going to evolve into Abrahamism or other conveniences for the sake of social needs?
Well,
Thank you.
believe it or not, I think the disagreements of Christianity will make sure that that will probably never happen. As in, there's too many versions of Christianity for everybody to just agree on something like that. Even within Catholicism, and that's the most top-down, militaristic, like sect of Christianity, where they can very easily just set things in motion and everybody kind of has to believe it. There's still, I would say, the majority of Catholics have something critical to say when these kind of liberal things are revealed, or not even revealed, but just implied. Like Kai and William, do you guys all support Catholic ecumenism just because some Catholics do it? Probably not, I'm guessing.
No, I mean there is not for ecumenism, but one of my priests actually explained to me that obviously a broken clock is right twice a day, and that a lot of people that are ecumenists, they're right in the sense that yes, like I mean specifically when it's applied to Christianity, like this doesn't work with like Islam or like Buddhism or anything. But when we're talking about Christianity, like yes, we want to try to have like more Christian unity and whatnot. So it's right about that. But what is not correct is obviously like, oh, well, we believe these two completely contradictory things. Like that's not okay, obviously. But they are right in the sense of yeah, it's better to be arguing united, I guess. That's what he told me.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting thing. Kai, what do you think of this topic overall? What's your
Yeah, ecumenism, you got the boundaries, but I know Peter Diamond will show those photos and stuff. But I do think it is, even from the microcosm, as Jonathan Pageau would say, I think we should unite against progressivism. When I was going through confirmation, I was like, the Protestants, but I mean, I think classical liberalism and progressivism are just way much more of a problem right now than just like bickering.
Yeah, I agree because, I don't think anybody's really declaring war on each other, Protestantism versus Catholicism. So
Yeah.
society's changed so fast in the West, which is where, for a long time, the heartland of Catholicism and Protestantism was, that those divisions aren't as extreme as the division between both of them and their bubble versus, as you said, classical liberalism. So interesting. But, as we all know, classical liberalism, and someone mentioned the theosophical beliefs of the UN, are all based on Christian mysticism in some way or another. So even the evil, classical liberalism and stuff, it's not like it's not impossible to understand. They get all their stuff from Christianity. They just flip it around and invert stuff. So it's easy to view that once you're aware of that. But I do agree with you guys about that. But I don't think that we should leap totally into ecumenism, because that might be a trap where it's like, oh, hey, we not defeated, but we clamped down on classical liberalism. People are more religious, but now we've mashed together all these sects and it doesn't make sense. So there still should be a dividing line somewhere.
Yeah.
And
But,
thank you all for calling in. I'll remove you
sorry.
from the thing for now. Please call back when you are, if you have time when you're back. I'm going to let Two Crooks, or no, I'll let Young Gamer, and then I'll let Two Crooks in. How's it going, Young Georgian?
Hello. When you guys were talking about proper catechesis, it led me to think about my home country, like I always do. But
Sakartvelo.
yes, the Cartvelo, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Good pronunciation. Thank you. I will say that we were lucky enough to not have such a revolution, because at the time, early 90s, we were kind of we were kind of more worried about the issues of Russia, and the internet was still a growing thing. We just came out of the Soviet Union, and of course we were still an atheistic state at the time. So there was a massive emphasis when the church rebuilt itself on proper catechesis, so much to the point that the church itself basically was a part of the school. You know how there's Catholic school? There is no such thing as Orthodox school in Georgia. It would just be school. Orthodox is talked about in school. We know about the history, or at least the praxis. Like, they will make fun of Catholics a lot of the time in Georgian school, because they'll be like, oh, you guys don't have you guys only have like one singer or two singers. We have three. We have polyphonic singing in our church. You only have the priest sing, which is not like if you go to an average V2 mass, half the time they don't even sing. So it's very weird. I would say regarding ecumenism, uh, we see it now, especially with the Muslims in Europe. Like, every time I have an argument with a Muslim in Europe, they will say, "Oh, they will appeal to the thing you've always talked about before, Jim. Oh, this abstract monotheism in which one God necessitates it to be my God."
Mm. Yeah, that's
Um,
definitely a problem. Like, there are some liberal Muslims who will like say, "Oh, Odin was a prophet." I mean, I think most
Oh,
Muslims.
what? I've never heard it that far.
I watched that.
There's a famous like WhatsApp video that circulated, and it's some guys on a live stream, and someone's like, "Hey, dude, what's with?" Because he had a ring like this and had Odin on it, and he was asking like the Muslim guy, "What's with Odin? Like Odin, L.A.?" He's like, "No, Odin is not L.A. Odin is actually a prophet, and Thor was his apostle." It was like, I mean,
Oh
it's kind of
man.
berserk.
yeah, I love that meme. But I would also say something like, as a Protestant, I have no problems with learning the EO and Catholics as far as being ecumenical, but never pagan and false gods. Uh, why'd you put up your hand, bro? You can speak
I was
whenever,
gonna
right?
ask. I was gonna ask if I could talk about
Hey,
something.
this is school. I will.
Okay, because
Go
it's
ahead.
related to this. Since like the Trump victory and stuff, I think like basically what I'm thinking is like, what's gonna be the new classical liberalism if progressivism really gets booted out? Because I noticed some of the crystal girls, like crystal people, hermeticism, a lot of those
New
people are
Age, yeah.
voting. A lot of those people are supporting Trump. So I wonder what form of
Really?
if progressivism gets booted out. This is from family experience and just looking around online.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
So if progressivism gets booted out, like what's going to be the new type of universalism, but without
Well,
progressivism?
yeah, great question. So that's
Yeah.
the thing. I think when we talk about progressivism and modernism, and guys, if you're watching, you're expecting like to do 3 hours on Tony Soprano's dress code or
Oh.
something. We're not doing that, obviously. It's good to get into these topics because this is kind of the heart and soul of what a lot of these shows are made of.
The
But I think
metaphysics of the Italian tracksuit.
yeah, the metaphysics of the
Yeah.
Italian tracksuit. But yeah, no, I
I
mean,
love those.
to answer that, I would say I think hyper progressivism is going to really just be an internet fad. This whole you got to support transgender furry abortions or something like that. That's never going to go beyond the internet. But I also think that millions of people, probably over 100 million people in the United States, have been radically pushed further right than what a lot of people thought was possible. And this whole an election thing between Biden and Trump in the last 8 years has definitely been the cause of that. And so there's been more polarization. I think that what you're going to see is you don't necessarily have to be a liberal to do this kind of ecumenistic stuff. Like you could be perfectly conservative
Yeah.
in our standard of what conservatism is and still say, I don't want to fight about religion. Let the Muslims have their, whatever country I don't ever want to visit, and I'm going to stay here and be Christian. And let's just leave it like that. And it doesn't matter if we disagree on theology. You might still see a lot of that, even if people aren't liberal. They're just going to be like, yeah, I don't want to disagree on theology. Let everyone do what they want, except liberal stuff. But otherwise, I don't care what the Buddhist guy believes. I think you might see more of that still.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of people like there's varying ideas obviously in ecumenism, kind of like I was telling you what my priest told me, how he's like the way I view it, I think what ecumenism should be is like, okay, getting everybody to the Catholic Church, you know? But it's like some people are obviously closer in belief than others. So the easiest like people that like the closest people to us is obviously Eastern Orthodox. So like that's what we do with the Eastern Catholics is like, okay, they're Orthodox Christians, but it's like we can argue and discuss, but it's better to argue and discuss in communion. Like that's the whole point. But the
Yeah.
vast majority of ecumenists he explained are obviously, missing the point or are heretics. So
Yeah, for sure. Before we
because
get
that doesn't
carried
apply
away,
to Mormonism or something like that,
right? I do want to let Two Crooks in for his valuable contribution. I can't see him though. I think I need to make it smaller. Yo, Crook.
Hey man, how's it going?
It's going good. How are you?
Yeah, good. So it's the other boy from the Caucasus here.
Uh-oh.
So just like what our Georgian friend said over here, there is a large degree of relatability, though of course I am a diasporan Armenian, but I think what makes Armenians from Armenia and Armenians in the diaspora a pretty interesting contrast is that we kind of have similar views on faith in that it is directly ingrained as part of our culture. And when it gets down to it, the overwhelming majority of Armenians, both within Armenia and in the diaspora, would say they believe God exists. And any lack of religiosity is not so much a result of the culture, but often a result of geography, as in there's no church nearby or Armenian or Oriental Orthodox church nearby or Eastern Catholic church nearby that would keep up such a faith or such cultural traditions alive. But when
I
these
did notice
Armenians,
one thing. Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Crook, but I noticed that when you're off the internet and you're in real life, whether it's boomers or much older people, the Oriental Orthodox and the Eastern Orthodox tend to really mesh together when they're outside of the East, especially. So, like,
Yeah.
if they're in France, Germany, or America, I'll see a lot of OOs go to an EO church and they'll identify just as plain Orthodox. Be like, hey, the Western sects are whatever, but we are part of Orthodox civilization. I think a lot of Armenians still hold on to that belief.
right, I'd say they can, especially because, to be a little blunt, a lot of lay people aren't aware there's a difference between Oriental Orthodox and Eastern Orthodox.
I
They
agree.
all believe it is this one big continuum, which is not exactly accurate. Any divisions, as our Georgian friend can attest to, are probably mostly political. So, for instance, this whole pan-Orthodoxy thing might fall apart when a Georgian and a Ukrainian run into a Russian, for instance, and they're very, let's just say, opinionated about recent wars and conflicts. But there is this idea that when we're going to look at the other Christians we will get along with, they will go out of their way to look for more Orthodox-oriented Christians first and foremost. And therefore, I also feel that when Armenians return to Armenia, a religious conflict or a religious revelation isn't exactly on the top of their minds, because unlike, say, the Italian Americanized diaspora versus the Italians in Italy, there's not so much of a big shift. And for Armenians in Armenia, you'd think they'd be the ones to be a bit more atheist than the diaspora, as opposed to the Americanized Italians versus the Italian Italians. But
Yeah.
as I stated before, Stalin went through this weird mix of simultaneously being proud that he was from the Caucasus versus being ashamed he was in the Caucasus.
Hmm.
Young
like
gamer, yeah. I don't know if young gamer's going to go through that as well, but let's hope not. But
No,
that also
no.
meant that Armenian Christianity was not seen as much of a threat, and therefore Armenians in Armenia are still pretty religious to this day.
Let me ask
But-
you a question really quick. But I don't mean to interrupt, but since I do want to kind of reel us back to the Soprano / Law / Boomer 2000s television
Yeah,
idea, are you familiar with these kind of shows? Like, you don't have to have actually watched them, but do you get kind of the theme that I'm talking about here? This kind of non-theological, just, hey guys, we're at the end of history. Like, history's over. We don't need wars and divisions anymore and stuff like that. Is that at all common amongst your own people, amongst Armenians, or is it like that just has absolutely no relevancy for them?
I would say no, because after the USSR collapsed in the late 80s, early 90s, we had the Karabakh War. For those in the diaspora, we were dealing with the aftermath of the Lebanese Civil War. And it's funny this was happening in the 2000s, because didn't the war on terror just pretty much start and there was no end of history? So I don't know why Hollywood would think that, but I guess maybe they're 10 years behind, because for those who are in the Middle East and for those who are living in the ex-USSR, history was pretty much far from over. Maybe amongst Armenians in Armenia, I'd say they could have felt it a bit after the Karabakh War. The first one ended in our victory, and they thought there was nothing more to strive for.
Yeah.
But with more conflicts arising, especially because of the close proximity to Russia, to Georgia, to Iran, I'd say that mentality might have dropped very quickly if they ever had it in the first place, but I
Yeah.
wouldn't be surprised. Diaspora Armenians, no chance. For many diaspora and Armenians, the Middle East is seen as our core as well. And by the Middle East, I mean, the Mashriq and the Middle East proper. And there's always something going on there. There's no way to read end of history in that part of the world.
The reason I mentioned it is because you might think this doesn't make any sense, but I mean, I'm sure you get it. But
Yeah.
overall, the audience may not. That's fine. The audience may not understand why this occurs, but I think not a lot, but a good enough portion of Lebanese Christian boomers actually do have this idea. Like they do, like they're Christian. They're never going to become Muslims or anything, but they do kind of have this aversion to being too serious about it. And like, hey, let's just get along. Like the age of like hating each other's over. Like let the Muslims do what they want. We'll do what we want. And we don't care about medieval Pope stuff. I'm a Catholic, they'll say, but I don't care about medieval Pope stuff. And I just kind of want to like enjoy life. I've seen a lot of boomer Lebanese Christians who are exactly like that. Like our history's over. Like all these wars are just stupid in the Middle East. We should be better than these savage Arabs who are killing each other. So I think that it's common amongst Lebanese. My own parents are like that sometimes too.
Jim, that's impossible. In Lebanon, the ride never ends. That's impossible.
It is, but there's a lot of
know.
people I've spoken to and I've visited, and they'll be like, yeah, oh, this is a complete shithole, and we're on the brink of annihilation from Daesh, for example. But, history's over. It's like, what are you talking about? Like, you're like a medieval warlord, like 10 feet away. How is history over? But a lot of them will still have that view, maybe from idolizing the West, something like that. I don't know.
I think they're in self-denial, probably maybe out of all the stuff they've seen or heard about, they just desperately want it to end. But I will say, I do think an ideal situation for Lebanon or the Middle East is, yeah, exactly. The Christians, Muslims, Jews, and Druze, we all have our own religion. We all believe in what we want to believe. We do wish the others would convert to our faith, of course, but as long as we're not doing ultra blasphemous stuff and trying to behead each other for being infidels or heretics, I think that's the way to go forward for the Middle East. And I do mention Druze, but once again, they don't even know what they believe in, so good luck with that.
They don't have nothing. Joey Paisano, like this guy's like, hey, you're attacking Italian Americans, you're disparaging them. You can come onto the stream. I'm not attacking Italian Americans at all.
Jim, I just thought of another point because I remember you asked me, well, okay, William, you're Catholic. Like, what is it about the characters that are genuinely Catholic? Something I actually forgot to say. It's true in Sopranos, and it's also true in like The Godfather and Narcos, is that they don't blaspheme. Like that is like the lowest form of of human activity for them. Like they'll murder, they'll rape, they'll pillage and all that bad stuff. But like if you say something bad like about Mary in front of them, they'll flip out. That to them is like disgusting. Also like tattoos, they're like, that's stupid. And like you could tell like the men in the show, like end of that time, like you could still tell like visually, like, okay, like they're men, not in like the cringe like Andrew Tate, like, oh, I'm a man, but like you can tell like, yeah, they're men.
Remember
like
the Polly freakout scene?
Oh, sorry.
Remember the Polly freakout scene? I love that scene when like they're doing they're sitting at the table. We're gonna find your parents, and Polly is like, it's black.
Oh, yeah.
But
I ain't got no kids.
I think it's like an identity thing. It's kind of like the whole Alex O'Connor, your environment, bro. You're just shaped by your environment, man. I think it kind of reflects that idea. It's like, oh, it's my identity, bro. It's just my will to power. It's my identity. So
I agree with that. There's a lot of other instances, like you mentioned, William, in The Sopranos and in other shows that are kind of adjacent to that, where people will do stuff very contradictory to their religion, but then there's a line that you cannot cross, for instance. So I always find that to be interesting. Like Tony, for instance, he's fine with killing people, but he hates when people will kill animals who are defenseless or something like that. So he has kind of this like infantilization of animals because he's lost faith in people, it seems. And so I always found that to be extremely interesting and honestly kind of relatable part.
The childless cat lady.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
I have a question about the show. Do they ever talk about North versus Southern Italians? Because I did go to Italy in the summer of 2023. It's mostly Southern Italians, what we associate with Italian culture. North Italy is much more like Austria, Germany. Yeah.
Well, yeah, for sure. So I've talked about North-South Italy a few times on my streams, but in the show, it's more like passing comments. They don't devote a whole scene to it or anything, but they go to Tony's mother, and this chef, Artie Bucco, brings her a dish, and it's like risotto or something. And says, I got you this for you. It's Northern, and she refuses to eat it because it's not from Southern Italy.
Yeah, if you guys really want that experience, I recommend reading the Godfather book. It delves into a lot of like the difference between the North and the South.
Yeah, they're huge because like the north of Italy, the north down to the center has a strong influence, strong Germanic influence and stuff too. I mean, not just in terms of a little culture, but like the people are actually descended from Germanic people, and so the meme about like Southern Italians looking a lot different isn't necessarily wrong. Like it is a stereotype for a reason. The culture is a lot different, and even in Sicily, they the dialect is much different. They speak a different type of Italian. It's not the same as Northern Italian whatsoever.
Yeah,
that's right. And even like the Godfather novel also delves into the even different factions within the mafia. And so like, okay, the South had like, the Cosa Nostra in Sicily, which is what Don Corleone is, and then the Camorra, that's what Furio in The Sopranos is part of in Naples. And then there's some other ones here and there, but then, okay, when push comes to shove, they all are united in the sense that they hate the North. It's just funny to see all those different conflicts.
This is making me hungry for pasta, Jesus.
Oh, yeah.
So, when I was in Italy, you had Sicily, which I would say they were halfway between stereotypical Southern Italians, but also they were very Lebanese in a way in terms of geography, their looks, some of the attitudes, I'd say. You got that North African Mediterranean mix. So Sicily is pretty much Dreamtown in Italy. Or to Kyrgyzstan, I guess, because Armenians aren't different as well.
If you ask Sicilians, not the ones here in America who've become more like pan-Italian, but the ones in Sicily, you ask them, are you Italian? They'll say, yeah, we are, but we don't really speak Italian. We speak Sicilian.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, what about your food? Well, we learned this and that from the Arabs, so we're different. We have different food. We don't eat your trash risotto and your stupid polenta. Like we have goat meat and like cool stuff here that you guys don't have. So
chicken marsala, baby.
Yeah. I like both. They're both quite interesting. My dad went to Italy for a bit. I haven't been to Italy, but I've had a lot of discussions with Italians, and we have a couple in the chat who are talking about, I don't even know, to be honest.
Two crooks.
Yep.
It's a weird question, but why are Armenians sometimes they look Persian and then sometimes they just look like Caucasian, as in like white? It's like really confusing.
What does that have to do with Tony Soprano?
Why are you brown? How dare you?
I don't know, like I mean, like some Italians look like they're part of the SS, and then some Italians look like they're part of the Saudi royal family. Like I don't know, just people migrate, change, like intermix all the time.
Yeah, it could be like that, and also geography. I mean, Armenia, you have like the mountains, which I think would give you more lighter features. It's colder, but you also have like the plains and the whatnot, the more arid regions that would make you a bit more darker. It's the same reason why Semites, like Jim, for instance, half of them will have light hair, light skin, light eyes, because they're more from Al-Sham, Bilad al-Sham, the Levant, while those who are more from the desert, they're going to probably develop darker skin, curlier hair, and whatnot. And actually, with Armenians and Arabs, Assyrians, you put us in the sun for 5 minutes, we're going to get really tanned, unlike white people who will get sunburned.
What's interesting is that I think most people are, I think all of us are more pale than we ought to be. Even people from Germany should probably be a little darker than they are, because none of us get enough sun. But whatever, that's a whole other topic. But with Armenia, it's interesting, and people always say like, oh, like Young Gamer, you just like, oh, how come some of you guys look like Persian and brown? Well, if you ask certain groups, the Iranians were the original whole milk. So you just got you're done.
Iran. Yeah, Iran will not let go of their country, meaning land of Aryans, anytime soon.
Yeah, I'm partially Semitic, so I can speak with similar experience. A lot of people actually ask me if I'm Armenian or Georgian or from the Caucasus.
I
I don't know,
believe
like
you.
what would you guys think? I'm curious.
Uh,
It's really the curly hair and it's really like black is what people like get kind of
I
confused with.
really wouldn't say that curly hair isn't that popular in Georgia. And plus,
That was just my anecdotal kind of
I have
thoughts.
to speak from my own experience. You know, I'm half
Are
Kazakh
you
as
Trent
well.
Horn?
Yeah, a lot of
But you look more. I'll be honest. You look more like Italian Jew. Like a Jew from New York.
Italian
Uh,
Jew? That's
Sorry, I
very
don't know what
Super New
specific.
York.
there is Italian Jews. Yeah.
That's the super New York identity.
Super
Oh,
New
dude, you're
York.
not Ashkenazi. Get out of here with that crap. You're specifically an Italian Jew.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, right.
Jim Yani, I'd say he would probably pass for Lebanese, like a Beiruti guy.
He
Yeah, a lot
could.
of people ask me that too.
Like if he said he was from like somewhere as like, oh, my parents are from some obscure little mountain village, I would believe that. Yeah.
Yeah, I've basically been asked anything that isn't black or Asian. People have asked me those countries. Like a lot of Turkish, I get that. And I'm like, oh, I don't like Turkey. Stop asking me that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Turks can look all over the place. I think Iranians can
Yeah.
too, but they do have a certain look. I can tell when someone isn't Iranian, I guess. But I can't
No,
always tell when someone is.
I met some Turkish people that I literally thought they were just like suburban white people. And I'm like, wait, you're Turkish? They're like, yes, I am Turkish. I'm like, oh, okay. Whatever.
Well, a lot of them are just Muslims from the Balkans that became.
Oh, that's right.
Turks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good point. I didn't think about that.
They're like Albanians or like
Bosniaks.
from
Bosnians.
Macedonia or Bulgaria,
Yeah.
and they just became Turks.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
your
we
population changes.
and we are also are forgetting that it's technically the Turks in Central Asia who changed with all the Mongolian influence. The ones who left beforehand would still look whiter. They'd be like the Finns, Hungarians, Estonians, that steppe people.
yeah.
They actually are pretty pale Caucasian looking, but the ones who live near the Mongolians and the Chinese, the Kazakhs, for instance, those were the ones who tended to change. But also, as much shit I will give to Turkey, there were a lot of Muslims in the Balkans who were pretty much just expelled. They said, vamos, go on to Turkey, and Turkey will force its Muslim minorities to identify as Turkish. And that's a huge problem with the Kurds, but only the Kurds are able to successfully resist because they have large numbers. Whereas, say, Balkan Muslim refugees, they had no choice but to identify as Turkish, and they were too small a number to do anything about it.
Well,
I think
and
yeah.
Anatolian or Asia Minor Greeks also, or Greek-speaking people in Asia Minor became Greek when they went to Greece. You know, so like
Yeah.
there's some Greeks who aren't technically from Greece if you go back further enough. Yeah.
But those people that were like forcibly like Turkicized, like did they have to change their names? Like, do they have Turkish names or do they retain like Slavic and Greek things?
I
Those
think
are
they're supposed to change, and that's
Just changed?
also why
Okay.
and that's also why the Kurds get pissed because Kurdish is an Indo-Aryan language, not related to Turkish at all. And again, right now it's mostly the Muslims who are forced to change. The Christian minorities still technically are Christian minorities, such as Bulgarians, Armenians, Greeks, and whatnot. But rather than assimilate and become Turkish or Turkic, they just leave, I guess.
Yeah.
And they still retain their names. If you're an Albanian Muslim in Turkey, after a while there will be pressure on you to become Turkish because according to their law or something, all the Muslims are Turkish, and God knows what they're doing to the Arab Muslims there. That cannot.
Well, the reason for that actually has nothing to do with the Ottoman Empire. So
Yeah.
you know what? I got to pull up an Ottoman map. We're so not talking about TV anymore, which is fine.
I was
But,
gonna say the Sopranos and how it relates to the Ottoman Empire.
well, this is I gotta go in a few minutes anyway, so it's fine for me when the
Mhm.
ending like kind of wails off. But
As
I
is
do want
tradition.
to. Yeah,
That's
let's
just the nature of podcasts. I do,
Well,
and that's how it
Tony
works.
Soprano's Jungian archetype matches the map of the Ottoman Empire.
Now, does Silvio look like a Balkan Turk, or is he from West Armenia? Anyway, so
Yeah, where
we
are you
look-
going, chat?
yeah, so basically, this is some okay map. It's a French map of the Ottoman Empire, even better. But
Nice.
Armenia,
but-
Albertone.
but the point is with the Ottoman Empire, what's interesting is that it was really, I don't want to say it's Third Rome or anything, but they tried to do that. And so Ottoman Turkish had many Persian loanwords and Arabic loanwords, and they wrote in the Arabic script, kind of like how Farsi is written. And actually, Ottoman upper class thought that the word Turk was an insult, like calling someone a Bedouin. So they didn't say, I am a Turk. They would say, I'm an Ottoman or I'm a Muslim. That was it. So when Ataturk came after the War of Independence, he wanted a ethno-national identity like the Europeans had, like French, Spanish, Italian, etc. So he forcibly made everybody who was a Muslim equals Turk, and Turkey equals the land of Muslims who speak Turkish. And so they changed it to the Roman alphabet firstly, and then they just made anybody who was a Muslim, except for the Kurds they weren't successful with, into a Turk. And that's why they got rid of all the Christians too, because they wanted to do the European ethno-state where everybody has the same religion, same language for the most part. And that's why you had all these Muslims from Macedonia and Bulgaria who became Turks, and many people who never left Anatolia, who may just look perfectly Anatolian, but they might not have identified as a Turk. They just might have said, I'm an Ottoman Muslim. So the kind of Turkish identity thing is new, and you can't really be a Turkish supremacist and a pan-Ottomanist at the same time. Like you like the Ottomans or you like the national Turkey, but you can't be both, because Ottomans didn't call themselves Turks. They didn't care about that.
Yeah, and I do apologize if I did say it was an Ottoman policy that forced the Muslims to identify as Turkish. I know it's a post-World War I kind of thing, although it is interesting because Ataturk, as far as I know, hated Islam and religion, but nonetheless, to him, if you were quote-unquote Muslim, you would have to identify as Turkish, and this really pissed off the Kurds and the Arabs.
Well, and the other way around too. Like he knew he couldn't just destroy all of religion, but he would weaken it a little, and he would basically say, look, everyone's going to be a Muslim anyway, so Muslims are Turks. End of story, and this is the Turk land, and you're going to be a Turk if you live here. That's all he cared about. Like, he didn't care. He didn't actually give a rat's donkey about theology. He didn't care if the Greeks believed in the Trinity. It made nothing to him. He didn't care. So that's what's really interesting about Turkey, and kind of weird. A lot different. That's why a lot of Turks will look down at Arabs sometimes, because they think Arabs are like these fanatics. Like they kind of view Arabs and Pakistan the same way. Like, oh, you guys didn't have a way to reform your society the way the Turks did. So
it's like how Germans view Austrians. You know, like, okay, you guys talk a little funny. You're a little too religious. Okay, you guys are kind of yodeling too much in the mountains.
In the mountain. Well,
okay, Jeem, I have to go, but can I say one more thing?
Yeah, I've got to go in a minute anyway. Go ahead.
Yeah, I remember the point we were talking about earlier of contrast the characters' lives with the Catholicism. You know, and I brought up the joie de vivre, the joy of life, right? I was thinking, you could do a stream about it, or maybe, I mean, it's a concept more familiar to me because I'm Catholic. I could just make a video about it, about like Catholic versus Protestant lifestyle. It's like the Chad joie de vivre versus the Virgin Protestant work ethic, or something like that. You know?
Oh yeah, that would be an interesting topic. That got brought up recently. Who blamed the Protestant work ethic? There was a Catholic channel.
Brian Halsworth. Yeah, my buddy just talked to me about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I didn't watch it. So what's his thing about? What's the thesis here?
Oh, I remember it.
Yeah. You go ahead. Yeah.
It's okay. So there used to be a distinction. The priest is doing the holy work.
Yeah.
But now, because we're all believers, bro, we're all in this together. Now, it's everyone. It's your truth. It's mine. Just kidding. It's you participate in God's work, and so does everyone else.
Yeah, that is. I'll check it out. I thought that was pretty interesting, but that would be a good topic for the future.
Yeah, it's also related, Jeem, to like there's some Protestants. I mean, it's not necessarily the same anymore, but like a lot of the Protestant theology is still prevalent, actually a lot in secular people. Yeah. Like there's some people that like it's like the more you work, the more likely you're gonna get into heaven. Like if you are like a fruitful person, that's a sign that you're part of the elect. It's like out of Calvinist theology, right? And so that's why a lot of them thought okay, if you're sick and you can't work, or you choose not to work, that's a sign that you're going to hell.
Yeah, there's a sign for that. That's for sure. A lot of the Catholic theology stuff is interesting. We already talked about the whole living life idea, but there's also other things that are involved in Catholic theology that people don't really think about. I think a lot of it has to do with, you know, liberals can take advantage of kind of the more mystical side of Catholic theology, I feel.
Yeah.
And you could probably do the same for Eastern Orthodoxy, where you can find a very mystical side and make that's the way to God. So let's just make that as vague as possible, and then I can attack anybody who's remotely conservative because hey, I believe in that God too, kind of. So see a lot of those ideas, and people get their universalism from Christianity. So I mean that's always a hot topic.
Yeah, no, it's a fascinating concept, and that's just why, like, similar to when I first got on the stream, talking about the ethnography and like, how do I what do I feel in common with other people, and that's why like I feel more in common with like someone who's like Italian or Mexican a lot more often than my own countrymen who like we don't really believe in the same things at all in our day-to-day life. What we do and what we value is just, I mean, we have next to nothing in common other than we speak American English,
Well, America is kind of interesting in that. I feel like if we all were doing this podcast / stream in Germany, we'd have a lot of different things to talk about. Like the society would be different. But with America, it's like the idea of what is America, what's America about, means so many different things to so many people. So, all right, guys. Well, I've got to go in a second, so I'm just going to close out for now. But thanks everybody, William, Kai, Young Gamer, Two Crooks, and Ahmed, and everyone else who popped in. I'll be doing a stream later in the week where I will let other people in. So that's that. But yeah, it's basically to kind of sum up everything that I talked about today. Oh, too close. Basically, even though we got off to many different topics like the Ottomans, Caucasus culture, Georgia, Armenia, etc., which has kind of nothing to do with anything at this point, to do with the Sopranos at least. The whole point of those topics and how we got there was we were talking about ecumenism and where culture was in the late 90s to 2000s. So if you're just joining now, please rewind, watch the rest of the stream. But my thesis was basically that the Sopranos, while a very interesting, high-quality show, is also a time capsule into a part and a section, an era of society, particularly in the West, but more pronouncedly American, where we thought that history was over. And so all these cultural things, even though a lot of the characters on there are culturally Catholic, some of them are even very religiously Catholic, like Paulie. They're almost the last order that's kind of progressed into a society that doesn't care about it. I mean, once Tony and his generation are gone, you have Meadow and AJ. And Meadow, even though she never goes into nihilism or anything, clearly isn't going to uphold pure Catholicism. And AJ definitely isn't. Even though he gets over the Nietzsche stuff, he's been too traumatized by his own upbringing and his lack of understanding good responses to atheism, the internet, and changes in culture, that you can tell that generation's done. And in the very the first or second episode of Sopranos, there's a TV advert or TV interview, and this guy who's an expert on the mob is saying that the golden age of the mafia is over. And I feel like that's also extended to religion and the way of life. The age that Tony wants to live in, he says many times, it's the 90s out there, it's the 50s in my house. That's already over by the time he's there. And this show is now quite a while old. Like it's not relevant. I mean, it's relevant, but it's not like up with today's times. So when you go back and you look at that and you see the great difference between that society of history is over compared to now, where people think we're doomed and there's going to be a third world war, there's a massive difference. We also brought up Lost because I feel that at the ending of Lost and a few other places, although it's only subtly mentioned, there's a greater spiritual Christianity that's really code for all these religions of the world having some kind of common God and some kind of common afterlife. And even though some people in the chat don't like Lost, I think The Sopranos is a superior show to Lost, but I like Lost more. So if I had to rate The Sopranos out of 10, it would be a 9. If I had to rate Lost out of 10, it would be like a 7, but I like Lost more. So that's the thing. Like, I can admit when a show's better, Sopranos is made better, it's got better dialogue, gets into deeper topics, but I don't know, I just like Lost more, so whatever. I guess I'll go screw myself. But I'm going to read a couple more comments. You guys are leaving, go stream or rape or do whatever else you're going to do. Or raid, I meant. And then let me read a few comments here. My hair used to be blonde, says Redeemed Zoomer. I'm basically Furio. Okay. It also can be an ethnic social group. Fair criticism. Thank you, Jeem. Take care. Jeem, can we raid John Moose Mean? I mean, you guys can. I'm not gonna be on here any longer, so you guys do whatever you want. Jeem doesn't raid. I've never raided before. I'll try it next time, but it's late. I've got to go for now. Jeem don't sleep, I guess. Thank you for that one. I'm gonna read thoughts on the supernatural in the Sopranos. Yeah, we didn't really cover that, but I just think that there's the implication that there is God and an afterlife, and that stuff does exist. Just the characters don't take it that seriously. I don't think the creator of the show actually wanted there to be, like, atheism is not metaphysically true in the show, but it doesn't mean everybody's just gonna automatically believe in God. So that's it. What am I saying? I'm tired. I'm out of here. So yeah, you guys can go do whatever to that stream. I'm out of here for now. Thank you all for the stream. And if you're new here, that may have been a weird stream for you to watch. You know, we didn't really cover much in terms of a proper movie review, but we did do a lot of stuff concerning theology and philosophy. So please remember to like and comment, subscribe, and share this video. If you have any thoughts, whether they're positive or negative, as long as you don't blaspheme or say something too terribly insulting, leave a comment in this video and I'll get to it. Or I won't, but at least you left the comment. And check out my library for introductions into political science, geopolitics, history of religion, history of theology, understanding of theology and philosophy by my book, The Misunderstood Bible, 2nd edition, and be on standby for my horror slash fiction novel that will be out in the next month or so. I'm going to leave you guys with my video, and that shall be that.
Freakiness is a part of life. Original Baramonga along with the two bad, wicked youths of rap. God have mercy, whoa.
What's the business? Talk paper when I'm riding by. They know it's Drizzle, he the truth off the east side. I know who ain't got my money because they ducking high. I grind for me and mines, I got the green light. I got to get it how I live it, that means front line. I got them zips, I got that soft, I got that